and you guys should be good.
All right, we are back into open session. We will go the next thing on the agenda, which is public comments. And I don't think that we have any. Am I right? So
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so we know that if someone wants to submit a comment, they can do that.
Yep.
Advanced board member certification. Alex and I both got our advanced board member certification. Someday we'll
Congratulations.
See. Yeah. And then our correspondence log is updated for anyone that wants to check that out. And last but not least, the board calendar. Any questions from that? Anything we need to pay attention to, Dr. Simpson?
Yeah, the only thing that we reflected, which we shared with you before, is that we are going to do the tax rate hearing on September 29th, as well as the board meeting. And so we will communicate that in a lot of different ways with community members, including how they can connect and contribute and ask questions during the tax rate hearing. So one thing that's going to be a little bit different this year than past is that typically we had posted in the Webster Kirkwood Times, as well as on our Facebook, as well as on our schools, because our schools are high traffic areas. But Webster Kirkwood Times won't be back in print prior to then, and our schools aren't getting a whole lot of traffic right now. So Sherry and Kathy have kind of have a lot of different ways and a lot of different places that they're going to publicly post the tax rate in a lot of different locations. It'll still be posted electronically. We'll still look to get it in the Webster Kirkwood Times online, but just kind of wanted to make you aware of that. Different kind of time.
All right, sounds good. And we are on to reports from superintendent and staff. Dr. Simpson.
Thank you very much. Wanted to share just an update and discuss a few things as it relates to virtual learning and planning. And I am going to share my screen. Let me get to this here. Okay, can you see it? You able to see the district update on virtual planning and learning?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to proceed. The first thing I am going to do is just give the board an update on the current metrics. Again, this is something that we are discussing regionally as superintendents. Superintendent subgroup meets with the health department every single Thursday. We receive updates and examine the data daily as it relates to St. Louis County. We're also able now to get data on St. Louis County site broken down by zip code and actually broken down by school district. It goes that granular now. Again, some of the reminders, and I won't go through all of them again, but we're looking at the number of daily new cases and what trends are showing, what are 14-day period trends showing. We're looking at test positivity rate, and that again is just how many of the tests that are administered are coming back positive. Transmission rate, which is looking at how many people somebody who is a case who has COVID-19 is also infecting. That's the transmission rate. We're also looking at the number of cases, and we're also looking at some of the specific age data. This was kind of the summary that I shared with you last time we met, and you'll see that the date of this particular report was August 26th, and the arrows represent what level that data falls at. Green is always the best, yellow is the second best, orange is the third best, and red is the worst. And you could see on August 26th, our case averages were in the green, are in the orange level, but our trends were going down. Our transmission rates were below 1, which is where we want to be with COVID-19. And the positivity data was on the higher end of the yellow. How it looks today is we have, instead of 2 greens and 1 orange, we have 2 orange and 1 green, as well as another yellow. Our case rates haven't changed much. They're still in the orange. They're still about that 17.5 into 18.5 band. It's been pretty consistent lately. At this moment, some of our trending is still going down when we look at those rolling 14-day averages. Our transmissions have gone up slightly. That's the area that moved from the green to the orange. And then our 7-day positivity average has come down a little bit, but it's still in that yellow category. And here's a little more in depth so you could see some of those trends. So if you look at St. Louis again, pre-intervention, pre-closures in St. Louis County, it was at a 3.38. And then we reached that peak into July, early August, which is when we made the decision to go virtual K-12. And then it continued to trend down, and it slightly moved up a little bit, but overall, it's still on the trend downside. Here is the positivity rate. It's maintained somewhere between 7 and 9 throughout. Here's the look at the 7-day averages on cases. Again, we're in a pretty solid orange since, the few red, orange since July, but orange most of the way. But you could see if you looked at August 12th, we were at 24 there. And if you just kind of do your own glance at it, you can see we've kind of trended down overall. But still, we're in that mid to high part of the case average. Here's the look at the county residents broken down by age, and this is the number of cases. Again, the 0 to 9 group has the lowest number of cases. The 10 to 19 group has come down from its peak, which is around 30 about 4 weeks ago, and it's kind of plateaued around that 20, 25 marker right there. I will say that one of the things that we're looking for St. Louis County to do is to become even more specific in the data that they give us. Can they break this down by smaller grade level bands? We've also asked, can they look at the 10 to 19? Can they kind of maybe take out the 18 to 19 category as we think of trying to differentiate between high school and college? Certainly, we have some of our, half of our kids, seniors are 18, half of them are not, but just felt that number could be broken down a little bit better as we look to make decisions in K-12 education. As I brought to the group last time, the data, at this point, we don't have a single threshold that we're using to make our decisions on reentry. I'm not aware of anybody in the county that's doing that, but we are looking to look for favorable data and favorable trends. One of the things that I did want to show you that we are working towards is this is an example of a sample dashboard, and Rockwood School District has it, and I really like their dashboard. Has a little bit of a summary, shares the sources of the information, and then it shares kind of the data that I just shared with you in a very easy to read way. And so this would be a place where our community would not have to go through a lot of clicks, but could look at the data that we're looking at on a daily basis if that data is changed on a daily basis. And again, it's really all the data that I just gave you broken down. You can see the color bands. Then at the end, it also gives an opportunity for people to share any thoughts or feedback they have related to the data and what they're looking at. So this is something that Kathy and Pat Weaver are working towards at the moment, and we'll look to have up on our site soon. As we move forward, and if the time comes where we do return to in-person learning, one of the things that we would consider is something similar to what Lindbergh has, and I'll share it with you here. And so they have a look at the staff within the school district as it relates to COVID-19. They are purposeful and not making it so narrow that people can easily identify schools or people. Again, it's a little bit simpler in smaller districts like ours, but you can see kind of the latest round of statistics of what it looks like at Lindbergh. So they break down on the student side, how many positive tests have occurred, as well as the quarantine, and then on the employee side. And they break it down by level, but don't break it into categories or anything like that. So where are we right now in kind of our thinking and planning things as it relates to virtual learning and next steps? Here's a timeline. Just kind of wanted to walk through these. Want to invite my team to go ahead and contribute any thoughts that I may leave out or you may have related to this. First, today is the last day. Our 6th through 12th grade students, our staff, and our parents had the opportunity to submit feedback to us via survey. We saw 300 plus staff, we saw 700 plus students, and we have over 2,000 community members that submitted feedback regarding virtual learning at this point. So while we've looked at that preliminarily, we won't dive fully into it until it's completed, which will be tomorrow. So we will come back to you next time around to share some of the takeaways from that data. So we'll analyze that data. From the 11th to the 28th of September, what our plan is to do is to get into some key problem-solving teams to address some of the key issues that are both that we feel, that we think from our experience, as well as learning from what our stakeholders have shared with us. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. Also, kind of side by side with some of those problem-solving teams, specifically focused on our virtual learning experience for all of our kids. As you know, what we had planned to do is come to the board on October 9th with a recommendation for the responsive learning plan. Again, the responsive learning plan having those 3 tiers. One is the all virtual learning, which is where we are right now. The hybrid model, which is half in-person learning, half virtual learning, or asynchronous learning, and then the other being 5 days of in-person. We were clear in our communication with the board as well as stakeholders that we would hold, we would reserve the right to be able to not move everybody to one level or the next, but could make decisions based on data, information, and what we believe is right for our student population as well as our staff and families. So we will be continuing to evaluate the local data and prepared to come to you on the 9th with that particular recommendation. On September 23rd, we will engage the District Issues Committee on the work at that point of the different problem-solving teams, as well as what we're thinking about in terms of the recommendations for the board on October 9th. We will issue a second stakeholder survey coming at the recommendation of the board. We're going to put it out on October 24th. We said week 2 and week 4, but we felt since people had a chance to complete the survey today, that I would make it 2 weeks from today where we put out that other survey. So we'll collect some additional data to inform our decision making. On the September 29th, we would come to you to present to the board on the work of those problem-solving teams, changes that we have implemented prior to that meeting, as well as some that are maybe a little bit bigger or maybe necessitate your feedback prior to moving forward. That would happen at our next board meeting on the 29th. I mentioned the stakeholder data. And then October 9th would be our plan to bring a recommendation to you regarding the responsive learning plan. So some of the preliminary key issues for the problem-solving teams, again, this is focusing currently on the virtual K-12 space, is looking at the schedules, the classroom schedules at all the levels, as well as the school schedules. the time spent in both the live virtual instruction as well as the asynchronous. We feel that we have some thoughts related to that. We've heard from staff related to that, as well as some families and students. So we want to bring people together, have some of those people at the table giving feedback regarding those decisions, and decide if we want to change or modify any of our current plans with our schedule. The also is communication. We can always improve on our communications. Some of the things that we want to do is just as our parents are navigating this online space, especially the space for our younger students, which is much more difficult and much more burdensome on the adults in the house or in the daycare center or wherever our kids are. How can we improve upon the communication that exists from teacher to family, as well as from school and district to our families? And then also the technology teams, technology needs. I think our staff has done a really solid job in support of the technology, but there are definite hardware needs that come up. There are needs with the platforms that we use, and we need to just improve upon our communication and support for our families as well as our staff in need. The other thing that we want to come to problem solve a little bit more is strategies for better supporting our most vulnerable populations. Our most vulnerable populations include the students who typically receive special support in schools, whether it's reading support, whether it's support with IEPs, with English language, children that get different supports from counselors or therapists within our schools. We also are in grouping in this category of primary level students at this time who are most vulnerable, given their the least independent when it comes to their own learning and their use of technology. As great as some of them are doing, they're also grouped in that particular category. But what can we do as schools, as teachers, as a district to provide better support for our children and families with the virtual learning program? And then also, one of the things that we knew would be a struggle, and certainly it's shown in the preliminary feedback, is how to help with connections and relationships in a virtual space. What opportunities might exist to create connections with students? What opportunities might exist for students to come together? What can be organized that still meets all of our safety practices and codes and regulations and the such? What can be done to make sure it's equitable for the children who are at home with stay-at-home parents, as well as those who are learning in different babysitters or with different child care centers. But that's something important that we need to make sure that we're tending to. So these may not be all of the problem-solving teams, but these are 4 that are going to get specific focus. We have some advantage of learning from some districts that have started some of this work to bring some students back who have some of this, have needs similar to our students. And so we have that advantage, and something that we feel we need to accelerate. Just as an update, we did make the move, as you know, to open the Walter Ambrose Family Center, and just wanted to give you an update that everything is going really well there. I have visited the center, and I know others have too, and it's exciting to see the kids and the teachers interacting with one another. It's been a safe environment for everybody. The parents, as always, rave about the programming that the teachers and the staff at the center provide. Just as an enrollment update, all the tuition paying spaces are full at this time under those reduced capacities. We do have a limited number of spots that are still set aside and available for students to qualify for Head Start or special school districts. And those spots are saved so that if we have those students who can access them and need them, that they're available. We also have, while we're not sure that the students would access the space at this time, we did turn away approximately 4 to 5 students on in both the 2-year-old full day program as well as the 3 to 5-year-old program. So theoretically, they are still on the waiting list, but those parents and families may have gone elsewhere and may not return. All of the half-day students who were interested in going to the Walter Ambrose Family Center were able to attend. High school athletics and activities. This has been a very hot topic recently. You are aware that we, in July, all of the districts in St. Louis County had made the decision to allow the kids to practice under the guidance and regulations of a safety task force that involved a number of doctors from a number of hospital networks who helped work with educators, athletic directors to set kind of thresholds and recommendations for activity. We were able to safely do that well, which is why we made the decision. I made the decision come the start of school to allow these students to continue in these practices, feeling like it's both voluntary from a staffing standpoint, it's voluntary from a student standpoint, and the parents signed off on it. I feel really good about how our programs have responded to what they've done. I do want to be clear that the opportunities that exist for our athletes also exist for our students to participate in band, and we are also want to have our students participate in activities and clubs. Those are getting a little bit slower started as a number of our teachers are still trying to get off the ground with their virtual learning. But if safely able to do that in any of our schools, again, following all of our safety recommendations, that's something that I do want to support. So one of the current tensions that exist is you had the task force that was making recommendations and guiding some of this work. And of course, yesterday, Dr. Page came out and had some regulations that he proposed, or not proposed, but legislated, so to speak, on high school sports. And the bottom line, as it relates to Webster High School, what I'm planning to do with our kiddos is to follow the parts of his legislation, or his regulations would state that the low risk sports, and at Webster High School, that's our golf and tennis, swimming, and cross country, that they still have regulations in terms of how they practice, when they wear masks, how they can be around one another. There's really specific details of what they'll be able to do or not be able to do in terms of competition. So for example, high school swimmers in relay, typically the students you might have one student on the block and students behind that particular swimmer, but there's space regulations are in place. There's a lot of detail that's gone into how to do these things safely. Obviously, cross country is not going to look like it's always looked with the big mass meets, which a bunch of kids right by one another. But I feel good about the restrictions and protocols and allowing the students to do this. Also, one of the things that I was planning to allow, something that some task force has allowed for some time, is the students to safely scrimmage following the guidelines of scrimmages that are outlined in the task force for all of our fall sports. And lastly, and I know this is a lot, and we'll have to start discussing things, the food service program. This is really a celebration. A couple weeks ago, the decision, we got the word that we could implement what during the summer was our seamless summer program, which allows any 0 to 18 person in our school system, whether they're a district student or not, to get a free meal, free breakfast and lunch through our food service program. Nancy, as always, does a phenomenal job of organizing and implementing that program. Delivery and pickup is available. So we have a survey that we kind of push out to people and keep pushing out to people, so that if they want us to deliver the food to their home, we'll do that. If they want to pick it up, we'll do that as well. This week, we had approximately 210 meals per day that were distributed out, and hope that number continues to grow. It's a little bit more challenging for our families during the school year, given the structure of the school day, as opposed to summertime with a different kind of window for children. With that, that's it. I will stop my share and I will turn it back on for any references people want to make to anything that I shared.
I have a question about the data.
Yeah.
So am I wrong in looking at the St. Charles County data or numbers that look like they're actually lower than St. Louis County, despite the fact that they have limited regulations and they're back in school?
That is correct. That is correct.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, currently St. Charles number of cases is at 16.78. Ours is at 18.64. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess
Now, their positivity rate is much higher. It's about twice ours, but their case rate is a little bit lower right now.
And their infection rate was low, right? Something else was low.
Yeah, let me share that again and let's go back and look at it. Oh, okay. So here's that positivity rate. You can see the red down here as a comparison to the yellow here. Okay. Here are the 7-day averages, case rates. So they're at the 16.78. As of the last week, we were at 18.64. No, that was it. Yeah.
Interesting. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is something that we continue to look at.
That's what I was looking for, I think. Go that last slide. Sorry. Can you go back to that?
Yep. Yep.
So their transmission rate is low.
Is a little bit lower than ours.
Which is interesting that their positivity rate is high and their transmission rate is low. I'm not sure I understand, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now we don't, haven't learned too much from, again, a number of those schools are in-person learning, whether it's hybrid or in person. Some of our schools we continue to learn from. Lindbergh has students in hybrid, shared some of that data you saw from them personally, K3. Fox and Northwest have some kids back in the hybrid model. And so, a number of schools you've seen in the media are looking to transition to in-person of some level. Obviously right now, Dr. Page has said, don't consider that for the middle school to high school, but for the elementary, it's something that if you feel something you want to move towards, it's supported. And so we've seen recently in the media some districts comment on plans to move some of the kids back or thinking about it. And so that's part of our work in the coming weeks, is to continue to monitor and see things and make a recommendation to you.
Got it.
That will be helpful if they can break that 10 to 18 or 10 to 19 age group, because my guess, purely a guess, would be a lot of that, like you said, those upper ages are probably a lot of college students.
That's what we've hypothesized or wondered, I should say. Just wondering how that age group could be affecting that data number.
Mm-hmm.
So figured it couldn't hurt if they broke it down a little bit further.
For sure.
I have just a few thoughts. I can't wait to see the dashboard on our website. I think that will be really helpful for our community to be able to see that. I don't know how easy or hard it is to do that, but I'm curious if there are any high school students who you might be able to, or a class, a computer science class that you might get to help to kind of do that dashboard in addition with Kathy. Another thought is just, my gosh, my love and my gratitude really to our teachers. I've seen online some elementary teachers having their students color, and they put their kids flat students up in the classroom so that their kids can see them, and other teachers are at home and have built incredible workspaces at home so they can manage their students, and just their creativity and flexibility in this time is incredible. My neighbor is a brand new SSD teacher in the district. I know he was struggling in the beginning because he lost access to Canvas and then it was deleted, and he had to learn it very quickly, and he did. And our teachers are really extraordinary.
Yeah.
And then to add to that, our families are extraordinary, and it seems that I'm seeing a lot of gratitude from families and our students too. Just they're going to have stories of resilience through this time that are going to be pretty incredible. But I also wanted to add, and I don't know if you could speak to it, but anecdotally anyway, I've heard from a family member who is a nurse that child abuse and neglect cases are increasing in the county, and I just hope that we are also still hotlining and knowing how to do that as teachers, as educators.
Yeah, and that data, I've seen that same data, and again, that's really one of the many worries when you talk about child abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, anything. School is a safe place for a lot of our kids. So when we talk about, is there a way to have some of our kids come back for some level of support? Again, all within a safe confine. We don't always know those things, but Sandy has been, I know, talking with somebody just about that particular thing and what are some different things that we can do to do even more to make sure that we're able to identify those situations and ideally support them on the proactive side, but then, heaven forbid, on the responsive side too. Sandy, I saw you come on. Did you want to?
No, I was just here to support, but yeah, we are scheduling road shows, HR road shows is what we do each year. We've embedded a component to speak directly to child abuse and neglect, reminding people of some signs to look for, to see, and also reminding people and showing people of the variety of ways that you can report, also ways, and then some links and some accesses, websites that they can access to provide to families should a family be in need of any type of support. So that'll be something that we're going to be doing, putting it back in front of teachers again to raise that awareness, because there was a point in time when the child abuse cases had dipped, right? Because we weren't in front of kids. And so what is happening? And in the midst of everything, how do we remember this component, which can, when you're stressed and you're thinking about your health and COVID, some of these things can, it's like I'm not as in tune sometimes with it as I would have been under different circumstances. So that'll be our goal, and to provide a space for teachers to ask questions, for us to continue to think it through. But you're right, Christine, it is unfortunate. I just hate this for kids right now. I really do.
John, I saw you jumped on.
Yeah, I'd just like to chime in a little bit too. We've worked with the counselors and social workers too on how to modify to a virtual format, how to work with kids who are experiencing crisis. So how to kind of separate the large group from the child who's in need, and to get the proper support for that child, and the protocols that we'll follow to make sure that we get the supports in place for that child in crisis.
Christine, I do want to echo that the teachers have done an amazing job. Amazing. The work that they have in front of them is super hard. Teaching is incredibly hard as it is when you have your regular environment, your resources. I mean, to have those people, whether they're 5-year-olds or 18-year-olds, who are all incredibly complex in how their brains work and what their lives are, and how they function, how they learn best. I mean, it's so hard, and now to limit some of the tools and resources that they have to be able to do that, and the actual physical contact, not just touch, but in touch with a lot of our, especially our younger kids, is a challenge, and they're working so hard. So major kudos to them, and that's an important group that as we think through, you know, our plans, that we have to be mindful. You know, our parents have been overall, again, the early returns on the data show very favorable, very complimentary for the work of our teachers and staff. And we also have to just make sure that we're showing that strong care for our staff to, you know, we may be, you know, some are all in a virtual space for 40 weeks, which is a long time, you know. So those are important people to be involved in our planning, as well as to consider in anything that we implement. So
I just have a couple of things as well. To echo what Christine said about the dashboard, I'm incredibly excited to see that. I also was very pleased to see the sort of survey at the end, so people can give feedback on what they like and what they don't like about it. I think that's important. Also, I was really excited to see that you guys were already thinking about sort of that relationship piece in thinking about areas of need and stuff from the survey, because I think that's incredibly important as these kids are disconnected from their peers and disconnected from their teachers. I think that is something that is incredibly important, and the sort of the mental health aspects that come with that. I think that is something that we need to be thinking a lot about. And then just sort of finally, I wondered if you could speak a little bit to if there's been any update. We've talked in the past about testing and turnaround times and those sorts of things, and how, if there's an update of how quickly we're able to get tests back now, and how that might affect contact tracing, and sort of what protocols are as we think about at least considering going back in person at some levels at some point. Like that testing piece is a big component of at least how we're able to contact trace and plan and mitigate. So I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
You know, one of the things, you know, it's the testing is improving. It's definitely improving as we go, but it can still be inconsistent in terms of some tests that are turning around very quickly, anywhere from 24 hours to 48 hours, but then there's also situations of 7 days. So it's still, that's, again, we said that when we first started talking about this, even in the, you know, the White House's return to work plan, like that testing, the far end of, you know, the spectrum was 4-day turnaround. We weren't even close to that, but it was all getting to like the 2 days or less was important.
Yeah.
Al, that's a big thing. I'll tell you one strategy that Lindbergh has used that they really like is they have a particular, I can't remember the name of it right now, but they have like a medical group that does their testing, that they contract with, that does their testing and for their staff, and they pay for the staff to get tested. And then their families can go there too. The families, the way they have it designed, have to pay for their tests, but the turnaround is typically within 24 hours, which is
Nice.
really good. It's really, really good. And then that group is able to also kind of serve as a liaison between Lindbergh and the health department, that's able to help with some of those situational things about that contract tracing. So I will give Sandy major kudos in all that she does and her team does to support our folks with the contact tracing. That is a regular occurrence of staff wondering like, oh my gosh, I was by somebody, you know, trying to problem solve people and be able to like, okay, you know, this situation, you're good. This situation, we need to consult, you know, but that turnaround is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? All right, Dr. Simpson, board goals.
Yeah, and I will just kind of throw this out there with given the charge to kind of draft some board goals that are, and I'll share my screen again, that are kind of like overarching type goals, written a way to, again, kind of articulate, your role in governance. I clicked the wrong thing. And really just for your initial feedback tonight, not to make decisions regarding. Obviously, all of this is in the context of this year. All of this is in the context of, where we are with COVID, where we are with virtual learning. But again, monitoring what we're doing to support the academic side of and social emotional support, academic of students, as well as the social emotional support for students, staff, and families. Again, that equity goal of monitoring our efforts and eliminating disparities, opportunities and outcomes, monitoring our ongoing response to COVID-19, which is big. Also, last year in February, we presented on what our plan was going to be to approve the strategic plan. Well, a few weeks later is when everything just kind of stopped and everything was, triage around COVID. So we have to get the strategic plan done this year. And then on the fiscal and operational side, some budget goals, which are regular goals, fiscal responsibility, which is always there, but it's not even more critical, but just kind of with our economic situation, with the loss of funding from the state, we have to be exceptionally intentional with how and where we spend our money and be mindful of our current budget status and do our best to project what the future will be. And Pam does a great job with that, but obviously that's a responsibility of mine and the board's. We have a lot of construction going on. We don't talk a lot about our construction projects because everything that's happening in response to virtual learning, but there's some really great things going on at each of our sites to make our sites more accessible, more inviting, more safe. And obviously the Hickson project is just going to be phenomenal. And then another huge task is how we monitor the transition of the new elementary boundary lines and support Givens Elementary in its relaunch and the creation of a 6-8 middle school. That's another big undertaking that is a part of our role this year. So any preliminary thoughts or feedback, any things you want to propose, add, edit, discuss related to it?
I'll just make a comment that it's amazing how something such as construction and boundary lines, which would be the issue of one, if not many years work, is almost, I mean, it's not an afterthought, but it's just amazing how, what those are really big issues. And I'm glad that you included those. Obviously, they're really important, and we need to remember not everything is about COVID.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I like the goals. I guess my only question would be, well, two questions. First of all, have David and Joe looked at this prior to sending it? Okay.
No.
And then second of all, should we have some type of deliverables, or I don't know why I'm using corporate speak all of a sudden, but some type of measurable, like how do we know if we're on track to meeting these goals? Like we're monitoring, but how do we know if we're getting the information that we need? And that doesn't necessarily have to be written down, but I think maybe we should at least have some kind of consensus as to what that looks like.
Yeah, we can definitely, and if these look like doable goals and outcomes, we could create what would be the metrics, or what reports would those metrics be shared in? Does that make sense?
I think
like to include with.
So I think what you're saying is this is how you will report back to us, but I'm kind of going a step beyond that and wondering, how do we know if the district vis-a-vis the administration is making progress toward those goals? Not just the report, but how do we measure progress?
So that's what we could add what those measurables to this particular document.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, we could add those measurables to the document, and you could make the decision on some of them. Some of them, like approving and monitoring the strategic plan, that's just, did you get the plan completed? But some of them in terms of, how are we, yeah. So I know what you're saying, and I believe that those could be added to here. And what I was trying to say is that we could also link to like what would be the reports where that data would be included, just to kind of help with the articulation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have one question, John. Obviously, I'm new to the board, but the first thing as I look at it, I see things like transparency with the finances and those sorts of things, I think is really, really important. But as part of that transparency, I think about communication, and I'm not seeing that same sort of communication in some of the other buckets. So I just think that's something that we should think about in terms of COVID with the other pieces that are important in the goals, is thinking about that transparency and communication piece, because I think that's vital for the community to have that as well.
Thank you, Ellen. I was going to say the same thing, as separate from budgeting, but because over communication is key in these times. Thank you.
Okay.
And John, I was gonna say you should add one, and I mean, you can probably start to check it off at least, but the diversity, equity, and inclusion position, you've done a lot of work with that already. Just getting that position and filling that position shortly. So I think you did a lot of work there. So I think it's probably worth adding that as a goal, and then maybe creating the position. I mean, I don't know how much more you need to go into that, because it's going to be that person's role and responsibility, but I think it's a big win.
Well, I think that's fair, because while that person will have a lot of role, and still ours to support and make sure that they're successful in the role. So that makes sense. Others, or any other?
Any other comments, questions?
Not a speak now, forever hold your peace. Again, we'll come back to it. I'll look to add some of these. I'll look to put metrics and then kind of align them to reports as well.
I will never hold my peace, John. Come on. I'm not capable of it.
I like that about you.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we can move on to the consent agenda. Anyone want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 5.02, 5.03, 5.04, 5.05, and 5.06.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Simpson.